Diet and life history traits of savanna-dwelling waterbirds in southern Africa. Implications for their conservation status. This study evaluates the relative contribution of reproduction-based life history traits and diet to the population trends in waterbirds from southern Africa. Life history traits, diet, and conservation status of 163 waterbird species were reviewed. This study was driven by the interest to know if population trends of waterbird species are affected by their diet, factors linked to reproduction, and growth. The waterbird diets has been central in many studies. Traits that promote dietary flexibility in a species can be beneficial given the global shifts in habitats, resources, and climates. It has been established that in evolutionary biology, traits do not evolve in isolation, but in a coordinated way with other characteristics that may include behavior, physiological, morphological, and life histories. Particular characteristics in life history traits could make some species more vulnerable to population declines if environmental conditions change. This is especially true when it comes to species with limited history of life traits. Some prey may be considered as important in an ecosystem by considering the number of organisms that rely on them. Environmentalists should therefore monitor the trends of such a prey species, as their population declines may have domino effects on other species that are reliant on them. This study attempts to understand the associations between conservation status, diet, and history traits of waterbird species found in southern Africa. Diet studies and published information for 163 waterbird species that have been recorded in southern Africa were reviewed, and the taxa they ingested were recorded. The sources used various methods to determine species diet. The number of taxa in the diet was summarized per species. For the waterbird species, a review on their mean clutch size, incubation period, ledging time, body mass and generation length, movement patterns, and their global population trend was conducted. Analysis of reproduction-based life history traits of waterbirds in southern Africa resulted in 4 clusters of species. The data optimally describes 4 clusters. More herbivorous waterbirds are in cluster 4. Cluster 1 contains the majority of insectivores, semi-omnivores, and omnivores. Cluster 2 and 3 species dominant diet items include tunicates, crustacea, small amphibians, and cleopatrans. Contrary to this study hypothesis, there was no significant relationships between waterbird population trends and the cluster integrating reproduction-based life history traits. The majority of the waterbirds presented in the study had declining population trends. Cluster 1 to 3 had a greater proportion of species that had declining population trends compared to those in cluster 4. This study illustrated that not only species with small diet items have higher proportion of declines, but also those with large diet items. Due to the sensitivity of most waterbird prey species to changes in water levels, pollution, and vegetation attributes, the waterbirds relying on these species may be at a greater risk of decline. It can be argued that the species consuming larger prey items have higher proportions of declines because such species are mostly large-bodied and therefore more prone to disturbances and habitat fragmentation when compared to smaller ones. Large water-bodied species are also targeted by hunters. All the species that grouped in cluster 4 are waterfowl dominated by ducks and geese that feed on small food items. This finding is important as the diet of waterfowl is limited to water bodies, and they also face pressure from harvesting by humans, disease risk, and other global climate and habitat change mediated challenges. Conservationists, therefore, need to strengthen mitigative effort against the main drivers such as habitat destruction and hunting. This study revealed that Tunisiads, Crassidia, amphibians, molluscs, and Cleopatrans are constantly at the top of the diet of all the allocated waterbird clusters. With the global climate declines in these prey items, this study also emphasizes the threat warnings, particularly in relation to the species that feed on small items. There is a need for united efforts in mitigating wetland disturbances, chiefly habitat destruction and hunting, as these directly affect the prey base.